Lali-ho, everyone, and welcome back to another one of these crazy solo challenges. It's the only other one that is pre-recorded, and I wanted to go ahead and get this out of the way. So this is Tamtara Deepcroft. It is the second dungeon in the game. It is usually pretty easy, although I ran into a few very interesting things in this. I honestly, this was a learning experience and a little bit of luck, but we managed to get through it. And I honestly, you see how my EXP is like nearly maxed out there. I really should have just gone with going and doing my what's it called? My hunting log, because to this point I have not touched the level 20 hunting log, 20 to 30. The hunting log, by the way, for anyone who may not know, is a system put in place for the classes for every 10 levels, from level 1, 10, 11 to 20, etc. You get a group of enemies that you're sent to hunt. And you have to kill insert number of these enemies for page 1 through 10 of the log, or page 11 through 20 of the log, etc., etc. And hunting down those enemies gives you a bonus of EXP, and when you complete a full page of 10 monster sets, you get another bunch of bonus EXP. So it's a very good way of getting a lot of early levels. The downside is that on level 23, I should have at least gotten that last level. And I even thought about it. I was like, man, I really should get this last level before I go in. But, screw it. I'm going to do it anyway. Would have made things a lot easier if I'd gotten that last level. I will say that now. The enemies here do a little bit more damage. These flesh fly swarms in general are like the bats from Sastasha, and the fact they don't have a weapon skill. But because they don't have a weapon skill, their auto attack damage does more damage because they don't stop to use a skill that you can dodge. In fact, it comes to a point where sometimes enemies using skills is a good thing. And this is something I know from Final Fantasy XI too. I mean, enemies that don't use weapon skills are usually dangerous because they're constantly hitting you. There's never a pause in their attack. They are just constantly bombarding you. And this holds true in this game as well. Although, see how that beetle's using Bombardier? But if you notice, it didn't do anything for a while after it used Bombardier. So there's a pause in its attack. And that pause can be useful. Also, found out that guy actually comes really far up before he turns around. That's why I was backing up, was because I saw him coming and I was like, oh no, I don't need a third enemy. Fortunately, I killed the Fleshfire Swarm before that became a problem. And just like last time, stunning everything. And you might notice now that my potions are green, and I flip over to my blue potions. I think before the end of that, I actually move my potions up to the get rid of Provoke, because I don't need Provoke. Provoke is only minorly useful when solo. Outside of Fates, it has a longer range than Tomahawk. Yeah, it's right here. So it has a longer reach than Tomahawk, which means you can grab a single enemy from a lot further away. It only works outside of Fate, because in Fate, because everyone was just provoking and then not fighting, they would just provoke all the enemies and prevent anyone from getting claimed to them. In Fates, provoke does not work at all. Like, zero. It's really dumb, honestly. It's one of those things I understand why they did it, but provoke is an essential toolkit, and you made it completely, just worthless. But I digress. Hey, they may have made a lot of changes to the game and improved it leaps and bounds, but there are a few things that nag on my, I really wish you hadn't done this list. Even if they had a good reason for it, and trust me, they had a good reason for it. But I feel like it would have been better to just make it where if the enemy is not engaged, like during a fight, if the enemy's not engaged, because it doesn't matter if they're engaged or not, you can be fighting the thing, have hate on it, someone else end up doing more hate, getting more hate for whatever reason, and provoke still doesn't work. So you can't use provoke in phase to even swap tank or tank swap or anything. The only way you can do it is shirk. That's a mechanic that I won't get into right now, but so yeah, this dungeon is very unlike Sastasha, which has a few areas that kind of open up. This area is very cramped. There is no really big rooms. Even the quote unquote rooms are still really like tight in because it's a Deepcroft. It is a labyrinth of the dead, literally dead bodies everywhere, and it's an atmospheric thing. This place nails the creepy atmosphere, and of course there are these people in here, these Akink varlets, and the other two. There's two others. There's an axe user and a mage. Akmina, Akink, and I forget what the axe guys are actually. But these guys are children of Dalamund. A little bit in the story, and I guess I really should have gone into the story for Sastasha too. Sastasha is a grove, an underwater cave, like a cavern system, that was for a long time thought to be nothing, but you saw how I fought pirates in there and had to fight a Sahagin at the end of it. As it turns out, the Serpent Reavers, which are servants to the Sahagins and to Leviathan, were using that as a hideout, and the coral trick is the reason why no one ever found it. Of course, the Cattery, as it's called, is where Chopper was, and Chopper was like the last ditch effort to stop anyone from approaching. These guys, however, are the children of Dalamund. So Dalamund, if you ever saw or played the very original Final Fantasy XIV, back whenever 1.0, oh boy, 1.0. Anyway, I played it shortly after beta released, or not beta, but shortly after the game released, I did play it on a computer that was, at the time, state-of-the-art, and it chugged. Now, it wasn't a gaming computer, but it was state-of-the-art for, it met the minimum requirements. In fact, it surpassed the minimum requirements. And let me tell you, the minimum requirements were a lie. Let's just say the joke about potted plants having as many polygons as a player were not far off from the truth. It was a rough time to play this game. It was okay. It was a decent game, but it wasn't good. It had some interesting mechanics that I would love to see revived, but ultimately, I don't blame them for not. Also, Void Soul Counter, very interesting guy. This is a fight that I actually learned something about that I never knew. I've played Realm Reborn since the beta on PS3. And I never knew that this guy's in Thunder was set to a timer. He always casts in Thunder like 3 or 4 seconds after it wears off. And it is down to the second. If he is not stunned... Okay, it's actually a second. Or it's probably 2 seconds. But if he is not stunned or silenced, he will always use in Thunder right after it falls. And something else that I didn't notice until much later is that your silencing move as warrior, interject, is actually on a 30-second timer just like in Thunder. Not noticing that, it did cause some issues later, but in fact I think it actually part of the issues is now. See, I interrupted him. But he's done too much damage to me at this point. I don't think I survived this. Now, I suppose I should get into the fact this is not a deathless run. If I die, it's not like Palace of the Dead solo. It's not immediately game over. I'm actually using this as a learning experience. The only time I think that I might count it as an instant game over is possibly during some of the trials. Yeah, see, I did KO. In fact, that was the first time I KO'd at all. My character up to that point had never fallen. That's why I got the tooltip. Anyway... During the trials, you get the power of what is called the Echo, and if you're alive in a trial for so long, then if you are KO'd, you revive and you're stronger. Uh, I don't think I'm going to silence the Echo. I think it's more fun, more natural to actually get that buff and utilize it for story purposes. I won't get into that right now, but I feel like that because that mechanic could be useful without breaking, because it's not really that broken unless you just constantly die. Yeah, anyway. So the reason I brought up 1.0 is because Delamond is the Red Moon in that game. And whenever SE realized that they screwed up and they literally were like, okay, final countdown to the game's going to be shutting down, we're going to be recreating the game, they made this massive and just a massive quest line that was leading up to the game shutting down. I did not get to take part of this. Unfortunately, I had stopped playing the game before then, so I didn't get to witness this epic event, but it was essentially the Red Moon Dalamund being pulled down by the Empire, I think it was. They were dragging the moon down to the surface of the planet because it was an artificial moon. Turns out that it was a prison, not an actual moon. And it was a prison that was holding Bahamut. And that sequence, I've seen it numerous times. It has amazing music. It has amazing, just, oh my god, the way that they did it. They tore apart the world to rebuild it. And it's an amazing cutscene. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, please. But in summary, these priests worshipped Dalamund because, they're doomsayers. So they felt that they were denied the quote unquote holy ascension that Dalamund was going to bring by destroying them. So they're trying to counter Eorzean's people, even though Eorzea had nothing to do with Dalamund being broke open, but fanatics. They're trying to basically cause destruction everywhere to repay the transgression. That's the story behind Tantara Deepcroft. These demons are demons that are being summoned by the fanatics. The undead that we're fighting, the Akin, Akmena, etc., they are people that were interred here in the Deepcroft that are being resurrected by necromancy. The cultists are actually the people in the robes that you fight in front of these cultist orbs before the demon spawns. So there's 4 of them here or so. I haven't looked up, but if you look up, there's a massive ball of energy that they're all connected to, and we're severing the connections. So that's the gist of what this dungeon is. You have to stop each of the orbs, and then things happen. Akmena Groundsman. It's Akmena Groundsman, Akmena Varlet, and Ak-Ink Varlet. That's the 3. Oh, I guess you could just see the Lambs of Dalamund are convinced that heretics, that is to say everyone but them, interfered with the coming of their Lord and Savior, and now it's their sacred duty to avenge him. Yeah, you see, I've had the story sitting right there. I don't know why. Whatever. But that's the general idea. So you're here to put a stop to them before they do unrepairable damage to basically everything. Admittedly, 5.0 story isn't... Or 5.0, not 5.0. 5.0 story is amazing. 2.0 story isn't that great. They were still finding their feet after rebuilding the game. and it's a little scattered in places. I will say that, okay, A Realm Reborn 2.0, whatever you want to call it, it has a lot of moments. It's not the worst part of the game, in my opinion. I have very strong opinions on that, and I will leave them there. But let's just say that I feel the game does have a point that's lower than A Realm Reborn, but only just. A Realm Reborn is, for the most part, it's decent. Some of the voice acting is weird. Some of it's amazing, though. Now, granted, there is a voice in this game that I love, and it's a joke at this point because it's a part of the main scenario quest. But there is one voice actor who does the main scenario. By main scenario quest, there's a roulette that you can do called the main scenario roulette, and it's notorious because you can't skip the cutscenes in either dungeon that you get with that. So either way, you have a lot of cutscenes. But one of them is basically a movie with a couple of bosses thrown in. But there is a character, and I don't... while I do this, I need to look up the voice actor, because there is a character. I won't go into details. Okay. I don't remember much about his changed voice actor, but his original voice actor was Kyle Hebert. Not gonna lie, Kyle Hebert did an amazing job with this character. At least in this dungeon. I just love the way that the character is portrayed. And it's a good role. It only becomes a joke because of how many times people have done the dungeon by now because of the main scenario roulette. Because there's only 2 dungeons and you can't skip the cutscenes, so you're still listening to the same lines every time. Some of the voice acting is very stilted. Sid's comes to mind, but the voice acting does get better as the game goes on. Like, by Shadowbringers, the voice acting is almost just, chef's kiss. But there's still a few voices that the voice acting itself isn't bad, but the voice is bad. But for the most part, though, the voice actor does a great job. I can't blame the voice actor for sounding the way they are. Maybe they did that voice intentionally. Some of my voice acting is horrible. I have no place to judge there. But it's some of the voice acting in Realm Reborn, however, in fact, most of it almost feels like people trying to find their footing, and it kind of feels like the rest of the whole entirety of the initial game, the base game, is like that. It's trying to stabilize themselves, pull themselves back up out of the hole they dug themselves with the original game. And they did enough of a job that A Realm Reborn actually rose from the ashes and gave way to Heavensward. Heavensward is arguably the best, but I will say at the very least it is the second best expansion that has been made. I feel that there are times that Heavensward is better, and there's times that Shadowbringer is better, but we won't get into that just yet. Heavensward leads into what is called Stormblood, and Stormblood is the other low point of the game. I don't like Stormblood. In fact, I like exactly half of Stormblood. And it's not the beginning, and it's not the end. Stormblood has so many things that just annoy me so much. I'm not going to get into details until we get to that point, if we get to that point, because God knows if I manage to get to Stormblood soloing, that's going to be amazing. But just know that Stormblood is my least favorite thing in this entire game. I actually dislike Stormblood as a whole worse than I dislike Blue Mage existing in this game. It's Blue Mage's existence in this game. And that's saying a lot, because Blue Mage's existence in this game is a bane upon it. But I digress. So this is our third Dalman Priest. This dungeon's not very exciting, I'm sorry. It's a lot of tight corners, a lot of unavoidable battles, a lot of fighting the same encounter over and over again because of the Void Soul counters. Some of the dungeons in this game are just like that, and they're a slog. There is one dungeon that's more of a slog than this, and I don't look forward to it because it is a mainstream dungeon. It's one of the main scenario ones. And I don't mean the ones that you can't skip the cutscenes. I mean, it's a part of the main scenario quest line. Because if I can get to the ones that I can't skip the cutscenes, I'm going to talk over them. Or talk in response to them. I look forward to that, actually. I really hope I can get there. In fact, I don't think I'm going to get walled until... If I can get past this first trial. Okay, let me just start there. If I can get past the first trial, there's a chance that I can actually get to level 50 quests. It's if I can complete the level 50 quest, that's a whole other story. So we'll see when we get there, if we get there. But this dungeon is not very exciting, and I'm glad to go ahead and get some of my chatter done. But Stormblood leads into Shadowbringers, and Shadowbringers was worth Stormblood being terrible. Okay, it's almost like all of Stormblood was doing nothing but setting up Shadowbringers, which is weird to think about. I think that's what Shadowbringers is doing for Endwalker as well, but at least Shadowbringers was good. I'm trying to stay specifically away from plot points in case anyone watches this before they've completed the game. Now, as I get to those points in the story, I will start speaking about them. But yeah, there are definitely moments in this game that are amazing, like either theming, cutscenes. Like I said, I skipped the cutscenes here because I was, honestly, my mind was kind of elsewhere. I was still on chat with, when I recorded this, I was on chat with my friend, I believe. Wasn't I? I want to say I was. Don't remember. But this is... I made some mistakes, and I definitely did. I should have gotten the level 24. The level 24 is not a lot. It's like, it's only one level, and it usually doesn't make a lot of a difference, but if you consider, Sastasha was level 15. This is level 16. I was level 23 in Sastasha. I really should have gone ahead and just gotten 24. But, que sera, it's fine, it ends up working. It just doesn't work to start with. And I do remember getting infuriated. In fact, I was on chat because I had a discussion about a thing that happens later. And I will have a discussion about that again when it comes up. But just know that I was very angry. So we've completed the third... Oh, hey, I got the achievement to crush your enemies, too. That is killing so many enemies. I don't remember how many enemies it is, but yeah. This is a lot of man throwing axe at things, and that's kind of how this is going to end up being, is just man throwing axe at things. I guess I should go more into detail about Sliverhand. So Sliverhand, I mentioned, was my soloer mule character from Final Fantasy XI. So in Final Fantasy XI, you had the same 5 main races that you have here. They're just called different. Hume becomes Hira here. So Hira is your human character. Hume was the human character in Final Fantasy XI. In 14, you have the Lalafell. They were Tarutaru in 11. You have the Elizan here, and they are called Elvan, or Elven. We just call them Elven, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Elvan, because there's 2 A's. Then you have what we call Makote, we're a female-only race called Mithra. Mithra. Whatever. Oddly enough, as a note to that, there is a character in Gridania whose name is an anagram? That's the whatever it is, whatever they take a word and swap it up. Her name is Mitra. And Mitra is spelled Mhitra, and Mithra is Mithra. So I felt that was clever. There's also a character called Tataru, and her first name is Tataru, her last name is Taru. So her name is literally Tataru Taru. Yeah, that was intentional as well. Also, she's a gem. And you have the final of the 5 races was here it's called Rogdarin. I don't remember. I can't ever remember it. I always just call them Galka because I cannot remember the Rog whatever from this game. In Final Fantasy XI, they were a technically considered male only, but they are actually genderless. So they are big, bulky brutes with a tail, although I don't think they have a tail here. And each of the races have their own area. The Taru live in Windurst, which is a foresty area, kind of similar to Gridania, actually. But they are a group of mages, and they're led by a fortune teller. Her name is the Star Sibyl. The Mithra live off the coast in a jungle island, and they actually, we don't even get to the Mithra homeland, but they have a group of them that live on this jungle island, and they also have members of their race that live in Windurst with the Taru, thanks to a pact, because the Mithra helped the Taru during the Crystal War. Anyway, the Elven live in Sandoria, forested kingdom of Sandoria, and Sandoria is very much a Scottish-English Catholic conglomeration. They have Scottish music, they have a British castle, and they have a Catholic cathedral, and they have bagpipes and bagpipe music, and bagpipe music is amazing. But they live in a deep green forest. And they live to themselves because they are the most proud things in existence. To the point that when they die, they don't even die face down. They always die with their face up. Because it's like, their face cannot be marred by the earth. And then you have the Humes, which live in Bastok. And Bastok is an industrial country in the barren wastelands of Gustaberg. And when I say barren wastelands, I mean everything is basically brown and gray. There are a few patches of green, but not very many. And then you also have the Galka. And the Galka come from a desert. And their desert home was a massive, city on a desert island. And their enemies were giant ants. The Antikin couldn't get into their cities, could not defeat the Galka on head-to-head combat. So what they did is they burrowed under the city, and the whole city sunk into the sands. We're talking that there's a massive dungeon in the game called the Quicksand Caves, and the Quicksand Caves are the ruins of their ancient city that was torn apart by the ants burrowing under it. And now the Galka had to flee, and the ants inhabit it. The only thing that's left of the Galkan homeland is a small oasis in the northern corner called Rabau, and that's the last name of the character. I love Eleven's story. I could go on for hours, but that's just an explanation of A, why he's a Rog whatever, and B, why his name ends in Rabau. And I just explaining the one origin really didn't seem to do it justice. I guess while we're explaining homelands, I think they don't ever mention the Mithra main homeland. like by name, but the one that they come from is Kazam. That's the jungle island. Just as an off note, while we're killing randoms, we're almost there. Do you see that barrier right there? This pull right here is the patrol, and I fight it by itself so it doesn't join in when I'm fighting the other group up ahead. But this little group right here, and on this side of the barrier, there's another room up ahead that has one more group, and then it's just the two bosses. Because this last demon we're going to fight isn't the final boss, as you might be able to figure out. I guess I could talk some more about Final Fantasy XI for now. Mostly because I haven't got anything interesting to talk about right now. This is literally just... Oh, I guess I could explain that. So, even though silencing them doesn't do much, it's a free stun. And they pause for a moment while silence is affecting them. So it's literally just enough time for them to not be able to cast like 2 or 3 times. It saves me just a little bit of incoming damage. At this point, not having my healing combo, that's very important. For saving potions, mostly. But so, Final Fantasy XI, I'm going to continue with the Galka, because the Galka are probably one of the more interesting things in the game. So, the Galka don't reproduce, technically. The Galka are actually, they reincarnate. So, when a Galka dies, it is reborn as a child with none of its memories, with one exception. There is one of their race that is called the Tailkeeper. The Tailkeeper is the only one to remember its past life, and it remembers all of its past lives, to the point of knowing the entire history of the Galka race. So, before the game began, there was this expedition to the Northlands, and the Galka... each of the 5 races sent a member to the Northlands. Now, the Northlands are this cold, forsaken wasteland where the demons are said to exist. And, you know, they didn't find very many demons when they sent this expedition, but it was a pretty dangerous one. But the races you had 2 Humes, a Galka, an Elven, a Mithra, and a Tarataru. And this is back whenever they were not really the best of friends. Like, this was shortly after a war with each other, but they came to a truce thanks to the central place called Juno. So they sent an expedition to the Northlands to try and, like, explore the area, and the Galka was liked by the female Hume that went with them, and the male Hume also liked the female Hume and was jealous of the Galka, and the Galka were being used as kind of slaves, to be honest with you. Now, a lot of the Humes don't care for that, and by the time you get into the game, there's still some tension between them, but it's coming to a head, to the point that the Bastokians are acknowledging, you know what, these guys are part of us, not under us. You still have people, of course, on both sides, but a lot of it is mending the damage of the past. But, so the Galka that's there, though, is basically stabbed in the back and thrown down a hole by the male. And also, he also kills the female because I want to say he kills her and then kills him and blames her disappearance on him. I forget. Anyway, the guy was a total jackass. I mean, excuse my language, but that was... Don't worry, he gets his comeuppance. But he basically reported back to the group as like, I don't know what happened. The Elven looks at him and goes, after the other 2 have walked off, he goes, look, I know what happened because... Yeah, this is ad-libbing, but it's like, I know what happened because I have a very distinct feeling I know what happened. And I don't care, just don't let it ruin the expedition. Don't get in my way. Anyway, shortly after, they return, and I guess this is spoilers for Final Fantasy XI, because Final Fantasy XI is a very old game by now, and Could use some new players, but that event ends up causing a 20-year war. And it wasn't with each other. It's called the Crystal War. The Beastmen rise up against the 5 races of Altana, and oh boy, many lives are lost because of it. And it's all because of the Shadow Lord. Now, as one might have figured out, when you see the Shadow Lord, he looks like a giant Galka. And I don't know what gave him that power, but essentially, yeah, the Galka gave into this depth of hate and madness, and becomes the force that binds together the Beastmen and nearly takes over the world. And in one future, I think, does take over the world, but we won't get into the Abyssy areas. Anyway, that all being said, we are finally on the last demon fight. I hope that little bit of tidbit of information gets people interested in Final Fantasy XI, because Final Fantasy XI has a lot of background lore that is really good. I've only scratched the surface of it, and the part about the Shadow Lord's kind of main plot, but you don't really... It is explicitly said, but not in the main scenario. It's hard to really say. And Final Fantasy XI doesn't have the same kind of main scenario as this game does. It's... I don't even know how to describe it, but it's more freeform. But it's... Oh yeah, you may have noticed that I focus targeted myself. So I figured out high potions, because if you read the high potion tooltip, it tells you that it heals a specific amount percentage-wise, or up to insert number here. And I know that I haven't hit the point where it's healing its max, so if I get damaged under the percentage that it heals, which I think is 34%, then I can high potion and not worry about wasting any of the healing. So that's why I focus targeted myself. I think I had just done that because I hadn't noticed the arrow above my head. I have been rambling and rambling and rambling. Wow. I don't know. I have a passion for Final Fantasy XI. It was I would say the first MMO. It's the first real MMO I played. It was not the first MMO. Technically, RuneScape would be the first. But yes, I'm a player from RuneScape Classic. The original. That was before runecrafting was a thing. Boy, those were the days. Those were the days, all right. Those were the archaic days. Oh, how many hours I spent in that stupid freaking farm killing cows for hides, cooking the meat as it came up, and then throwing it away almost immediately, burying the bones. Yeah, anyone who knows RuneScape knows those days. Or anyone who's around for those days knows what I'm talking about, I guess is what I meant to say. But anyway, Final Fantasy XI was the first real MMO I played, and it left quite the impression. It's one of those things that WoW is good in a lot of ways, but it wasn't as good as 11, honestly. For multiple reasons. The biggest reason being the story. It wasn't until Wrath of the Lich King that the story actually got really good. And like Burning Crusade was good. Wrath of the Lich King was better in my opinion. But Final Fantasy XI was kind of consistent. Depending on what story. It really depended on what area you started in. Also, I think I left this cutscene in. I did, good. That's the orb that has been floating there this whole time. Lo and behold, Galvanth the Dominator. Yeah, he was what they were summoning, and in breaking the orbs, we summoned him. Granted, early, so he's not at full power, but yeah, we accidentally summoned him. Galvanth the Dominator is a pain in the butt. Solo. Normally, he's a super easy fight because it's a simple thing. You fight him for a short time, you get down to a certain amount of HP, an imp spawns and makes him invincible. So you go fight the imp, you kill the imp, you go back to fighting the boss. Knock him down to another certain amount of HP, another imp spawns along with a small group of ads. So you kill the imp, kill the ads, go back to fighting the boss. And then you fight him to a certain amount, and he gets down to another threshold where he summons 2 imps and even more ads. And you kill the imps, you kill the ads, you finish the boss off. It's not that hard of a thing. It's just about maintaining damage and maintaining healing. It's a very simple dungeon, very simple fight. It's a boring dungeon, but it's a very simple fight. And solo, it's neither. And it all comes down to luck. This is where it all ends up coming down to luck. You see, Marauder has no way to really lower the damage of water, because water is a spell. So I have to rely on his terrible accuracy due to my level. This is why if I had been level 24, it would have been a little easier, because the higher level you are, the more often the monster will miss you. It's the same thing in reverse. It's everything in the game has 100% accuracy if you're next to each other's levels. But, well, okay, not 100% accuracy. It does depend on other factors. But generally speaking, your attacks always have a 100% accuracy, and enemy attacks always have a, like, 95 or something, 99. They do have a chance of being dodged, but almost all of the attacks will still hit you regardless. And there are a couple of attacks that are 100% accuracy guaranteed. Now notice how low my HP is, and I've been using potions as often as possible. I can't out-heal his damage. Especially when he critical hits like that. If he does not miss enough times, I can't survive this. Now, Drain Touch is okay, because Drain Touch is a physical attack, so my defense hits it, lowering its damage. And Mind Blast is good, because he uses Mind Blast. It's a massive AoE attack. I can get out of the way, and I have time for my cooldowns to reset. Kiting this guy does no good. He can cast water on you from clear across the arena. So while you can outrun him because he's constantly stopping to cast water, it doesn't do you any good. And I lose it there. So I was like, okay, I just need to be more aggressive, more ready to potion at any given time. So I start having to pay attention to percentages, and yeah, it was not a fun time. This fight is the hardest fight I've done so far. And that's saying something, because usually the next dungeon is harder, but no, this dungeon was actually harder. This boss fight is harder to me to solo. Granted, there's reasons for that, but I won't get into that right now. But as of right now, this dungeon is harder. See, I tried kiting here. That's when I realized, yeah, no, it's not going to work, because he is actually able to hit me regardless. Also, can I also note the Soul Flayers have a personal scare on me for reasons I could go into details. One is because of Final Fantasy XI again. Soul Flayers are both terrifying there and a major plot point for Blue Mage. Won't get into that because that's just creepy shit. But Soul Flayers are nasty there, and of course the tentacled squid lizard thing has been a long-time staple since the original Final Fantasy, and the Cisco demons that they were originally called were also, well, I think they were actually just called wizards, but they were very deadly. If anyone has watched my Final Fantasy I playthrough from the remake on PlayStation, you will probably see how deadly they were. Because I'm pretty sure I left in a moment that things went badly. I actually don't remember that Let's Play anymore. It's sad. Makes me very sad. I remember Warmech going down like a little bitch. Excuse my language again. But, so I figured out I needed to save my buffs because my buffs don't do any good against him. And you see, well, okay, well, it does help a little bit. Water does do 47 during Rampart. But that's because Rampart isn't a defense buff so much as a damage reduction. So it does help against water, but it doesn't help enough for his single waters. It's much more effective at blocking multiple enemy attacks. I don't remember if Reprisal helps. Do I find that out? But regardless, I waited too long to potion there, honestly. That is all my fault. I might have actually been able to survive, because I think I die here too, honestly. And of course, stun doesn't work on him because he's immune. I missed interject, which annoyed me because I was like, ah, crap. Mind Blast is good because it sets up for, like, see how long it took? I wasn't counting, but it took several seconds for that, which meant my potions get a head start for the next one. Reprisal does affect it, but it doesn't affect it much. See, his water's doing 50 now instead of 60. So it does help. Wait, do I die here? I'm beginning to wonder. I don't remember. Oh no, that's right. I only died twice, didn't I? I swapped because I didn't want to get back into Mind Blast, but I don't want to waste time either, so I wanted to continue doing damage on this imp sets. Now, I don't know why. I don't remember why I swapped. Oh, because I thought Tomahawk was going to finish it. That's what I was trying to finish it with Tomahawk while getting to reposition, wasting as little time as possible. But as it turns out, Tomahawk didn't finish it, so I have to go over there and heavy swing it. I think I managed to get lucky. There was a string of dodges that I managed to get lucky with, and that gave me the time I needed to heal. And now I'm almost full health again. So yeah, if it hadn't have been for the string of lucky dodges, I would have died, honestly. And he used Mind Blast again at 15%, because Mind Blast is actually tied to his HP percentage, I want to say. Is it like 50% and then 15%? And oh, 6%. That's just mean. There we go. Or actually 0.6%. And I leveled up. And we're just going to skip the cutscene of him falling over because it's not important. And that will do it. So that was me stopping the video there. I didn't even... Okay, that's fine. So yeah, that is Tamtara Deepcroft down. So I don't know. This was the only two that I did pre-recording, so everything else is going to be live from here on out. I think I even mentioned that because I did record the third one before going back and voicing over these. So I hope everyone's enjoyed. I hope it was interesting to watch. I hope it was tolerable to hear me blabber. I do apologize about rambling, but unfortunately it kind of is what I do. But until next time, we hope to see you again. Get my outro right this time. Later.